you're head of sustainability for your company. You're a significant global miner. What is the strategy that you have for turning an industry that, by definition, uses lots of energy to dig up rocks and get minerals that the world economy uses, and indeed, with the energy transition, we'll use more of certain kinds of them, to put it on the path to sustainability? We did hear from Andrew Forrest this morning. He's got a particular set of strategies, but tell us about yours.
Sure, and thank you for having me here. We have set ourselves back in 2020, we put out our first climate transition action plan, where we made a series of commitments around targets to reduce our emissions over time. So we have our targets are reducing our emissions by 15% by 2026, 25% by 2030, 50% by 2035, and we've committed to an ambition of achieving net zero by 2050, recognizing that it's an ambition because a lot of different pieces of the puzzle have to come together. We need government policy, we need participants in value chains, we need many stakeholders to participate in this process. Our targets cover all three scopes of emissions, and that's probably different. What makes us a bit different from other mining companies, we have committed to include all three scopes of our industrial emissions in these targets. And we also thought, well, we can come up with a climate plan, and that's great, and we are confident that we can achieve it. But same as our ambition to achieve net zero, we are part of the world, and this is what I keep coming back to inside my company and outside. We are part of the larger world. And so
let's zoom in on scope 3, because that's obviously the toughest one. What is your plan for dealing with scope 3 specifically?
Yeah, so the Glencore portfolio mix is a bit probably unique relative to other companies in that we have a very diversified portfolio of assets. We don't have a single commodity that kind of dominates and others are perhaps more sort of in a secondary role. We have a very diversified portfolio, and therefore we're able to adjust the levers within the portfolio to help drive our emission reduction. So we have coal in our portfolio, thermal and steel making, and the commitments that we have made include a commitment to the responsible rundown of our thermal coal portfolio, thereby reducing our scope 3 emissions.
Over what time frame on the coal?
On all the same targets.
On
so
2026,
2030, 2035, 2050. So we're progressively running it down. And why do I use this phrase, responsible rundown of thermal coal? Is because we very strongly believe that precipitous unilateral action by companies, any one company, any one government, any one single actor, is not going to help. It's not going to help in the moment because of the disruptions and the job losses and the community upsets. And it's not going to help in the long term because actually it's going to disrupt countries' abilities to achieve their NDCs, their contributions, their targets in respect of climate. So we've committed to continue to honor our commitments to our workforce, our communities, our governments, and to continue that decline over time so that we're able to honor all of these commitments and to work as part of the system in a way that puts us on that trajectory to meet the energy needs of today, gradually decline that, and then at the same time build up our critical minerals portfolio so that we're able to meet the needs of tomorrow.
And I mean, you brought up coal. I take the point about energy pragmatism that we've discussed already a few times today. The latest analysis from the IEA and their world report on coal suggests that far from reducing coal, we're at record usage in the last 12-month period that the IEA looked at this, driven in part by China and India, but other places as well. So this is the reality of consumption. Just because you might reduce your production doesn't mean the world will reduce its production. So I take that point. But having said that, since you're heading sustainability at your company and you're a big producer of coal, how do you reconcile those two things? Other than saying we'll cut down a bit in future, what else can you do? Because coal is by far the most carbon intensive of the energy fuels that we use. Should you do more?
Look, we've looked very closely at our portfolio, and we've really thought about what can we do within this concept of the responsible decline, and what does that really translate into practice. So since we've launched this commitment in 2020, we took 2019 as our baseline because that was the last year we had the complete data set for the year that we launched our commitments. We've shut down 6 coal mines already in that time, and we've made a commitment, and we're on track to shut down 6 more before 2035. So we have a plan where we know realistically what we need to do to get to these milestones. And I think, and everybody, this isn't to criticize any other companies, everybody is in very different circumstances. We're probably one of the few companies in our sector today that has remained consistently committed to our targets. And that's because I think we've done that very rigorous analysis and that very thorough exercise of, do we know how we're going to get there? And I think that stood us in good stead. And I think, I've heard a lot in the conversations today and yesterday about how do we deal with the turbulence and volatility that we encounter today. I think for me, one part of the answer is to have done that work, to have done the work that stands the test of challenge and volatility.
We heard earlier today about electrifying field operations, or at least moving to zero emissions. What is the practicality? Again, you have a crazy billionaire who's ready to bet his fortune on doing all of this in the next few years. God bless him. Wish him luck. But you have shareholders. Your company has responsibilities on financial metrics as well as environmental metrics. How realistic is it to go zero emission in your upstream operations? On what kind of time frame? And what are you doing about it? What's viable? What works? And what doesn't seem realistic?
Look, so our targets are inclusive of Scope 1 and 2, so inclusive of our emissions from diesel use, from the energy use in our operations, and we look at these targets as part of our capital allocation discipline. We don't have, as some companies have done in the past, standalone capital spend specifically allocated to decarbonization. Mm-hmm. Our concern is that creates sort of different practices within the organization and a siloing out that is not actually helpful overall. The strategy that we've adopted is we look at our targets as part of our capital allocation strategy. We look at decarbonization. We also look at operational efficiency, energy efficiency, safety gains. So we would look at, opportunities to optimize our fleet efficiency with all of these different considerations in mind. Again, in our view, that makes it for a more sustainable strategy because we're less exposed to the risks of early adoption of some of these technologies, which are challenging. We're able to work with them as they come to market at a more mature level. In some areas, in some of our, we're building a new underground nickel mine in Canada. There, we've been able to design it to be battery electric vehicle operated from scratch. In other large open pit operations, there's incremental steps you can take in terms of improving diesel efficiency in terms of trolley assist to improve the diesel consumption of the trucks. These are incremental steps that we just integrate into our planning on an ongoing basis, rather than kind of look at these very high risk, perhaps very courageous.
Right. Okay, so that's you're pursuing this on an ad hoc basis based on local conditions. If it's a greenfield facility, you might be able to leapfrog on these technologies. If it's a retrofit, you pursue it in a different way.
We look at what's available, what makes sense within an overall capital discipline approach, where we recognize the efficiency of what we're doing across multiple domains.
We have a question from the floor on the Slido. Thank you for that. About the circular economy, asking really is a bigger question than the ones we've been grappling with thus far. How do you think about the idea of circularity of materials? What does it make you think about the potential for, I would extend the question to say, about future demand, about which there's a huge amount of uncertainty, obviously, including for all these, the rare earths and other materials and minerals that are used in the new economy. We've seen lots of booms and busts already come. And anyone who can tell me exactly how much lithium we'll use in 2050 will get a gold star, or if we'll use any at all, right, because of the nature of innovation. And so how do you think about circularity affecting perhaps future demand, and how you think about investment cycles? Because you're a very long lead industry. You need to invest, and the capex is huge, and there's a huge bets. It's prone to boom and bust, as we know historically.
Absolutely. Look, we already have exposure to recycling as an organization. We have smelting facilities in Canada that take e-scrap And we are, in fact, one of the largest scrap processing providers in North America. So we're already involved in this recycling space, and we see it as an opportunity in terms of exposing ourselves to new sources of supply. As miners, as marketers, we're always looking for new supply chain opportunities. We see it as an opportunity to participate in what we fully believe will absolutely be part of the ecosystem as we continue to need to meet the rising demand. Increasing recycling, improving efficiencies, strengthening collection ecosystems is going to be critical. I think one of the challenges that we see is certainly from a policy ecosystem perspective. We see significant, I think we've seen, for example, in the European Union, commitments around accelerating the pace of some of this ecosystem development.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen that play out in practice. So I think that's going to be the challenge, is the real practical day-to-day. How do you set up collection of waste? How do you get permits, facilities? How do you deal with storage, with shipping, with the issues associated with recycling? But is it part of the solution? Unquestionably so.
Let's get the lights up. Let's see if there's a question before we run out of time directly from the floor. Anyone have a question for our visitors right here in the second row? Let's get a microphone. Again, please make it a question rather than a long-winded statement. People hate gas bags.
Okay, question.
And identify yourself, sir.
How do you respond to the...
Who are you?
I'm Chris Welsford. I'm an impact investor. How do you respond to the accusation that your human rights track record is just so appalling that we can't invest in you? And there's lots of us in the sustainable investment world that just won't have anything to do with you at all.
I mean, it's disappointing to hear that. I think we've worked very hard over years to strengthen our systems for addressing our human rights, the risks of human rights impacts. We have, of course, a human rights policy that is available on our website for anybody to review. We report on our performance in our operations that are located in more difficult jurisdictions. We conduct human rights impact assessments, which
the DRC is a particular area of concern. Tell us what you're doing there.
We've done a lot of work there to, first of all, understand what are the real risks, not just for ourselves, but for our communities, for the broader region. The risks that we have identified, we've developed action plans for, and we report on that on progress against those. Sticking with the DRC, and to your point about an example, one of the bigger issues that we see in the DRC, not specific in our operations, but more broadly, there's the presence of illegal mining of cobalt and copper and very high levels of child labor in those activities. So we've been a founding member of the Fair Cobalt Alliance, which works with other stakeholders in the value chain, other companies, other NGOs, to lift up the operating practices in these cooperatives to help children stay away from mining activity. And we've been part of that effort from the start. So,
how much of this was because Elon Musk began tweeting about this issue?
He did tweet about this issue. I think it was part of the consideration, but we recognize that it's a systemic issue for the value chain. It's not something that we can just say it's not our problem. It doesn't happen in our industrial operations, so let them deal with it. We recognize that it's an issue that affects our whole value chain. Mm-hmm. We need to be part of it. We need other stakeholders to collaborate with us, and I think it's been a really a fascinating, but also a really innovative learning process that we've been on.
So. With that, there's one final question from the Slido that asks, would you commit your coal capex towards going to decarbonization projects? I do see a slight fallacy or a problem with that. You've already told us you're going to cut down your coal down to zero over time. So someone's asking you to commit to decarbonization funding that will decline over time, which seems an unwelcome attribution. On a positive side, how much do you plan to commit to decarbonization projects more broadly, and what can we expect in future?
Look, I think, as I said earlier, we don't focus our capital narrowly on decarbonization. we do, and we have made this commitment at every level of the organization, we have committed to transition our portfolio towards critical minerals over time. Critical minerals, of course, have a carbon footprint, but you can't have the broader decarbonization, the transition, without them. And so what we have committed to is that the cash flow arising from the company today, including coal, is going to build our project pipeline in the critical mineral space and thereby support the transition that we're all working towards.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. Please give her a round of applause. Thanks for taking our questions.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.